So this Shabbat is a special Shabbat. It is Shabbat Chanukah, and it's of course the Shabbat that this year became very special because um, Parashat Miketz says after 2 years. Miketz means at the end of. So at the end of 2 years, something happened, and we'll explain the context. But this year, it became so special because what it says here that after 2 years, this is the story of Joseph in jail, that he was thrown into jail last Shabbat, and because he was accused by his the wife of the minister he was working for, Potiphar, that he was coming on to her, and that was not true. She actually was trying to seduce him, and he resisted her, and then she retaliated and blamed him for trying to seduce her, and he was put in jail. But we were saying that actually, if the minister really thought that Joseph was the guilty party, he would have just killed him, or he would have thrown him into a regular jail. But he didn't. He was in the jail of the king, like the officers' jail. So I think what the minister did is probably trying to play both sides. He knew that he can't ignore his wife's complaints, but he knew that Joseph probably was not guilty as charged. So, but what happened? It says in after 2 years, Pharaoh dreamt a dream and dreamed, and he needed somebody to solve the dream. And the end of last Shabbat, which is the text right before that, two ministers of Pharaoh were put in jail. One was the cupbearer, and one was the bread maker. So with the wine and the bread. Some say it was the executioner, but I think it's the idea of the Sar HaOfim is the and Sar HaMashkim. So there was the bread and the wine. So the cupbearer and the bread maker, and and they had dreams. They dreamed, and they didn't know how to interpret them. And Joseph interpreted the dreams for them, and they said the cupbearer will be reinstated in 3 days, and the bread maker will be executed. And that's what exactly happened. And Joseph, at the end of last week's reading, asks the cupbearer to remind Pharaoh to remember him, to get him out of jail because he was innocent, and the cupbearer forgot him. But only when Pharaoh had the dream, all of a sudden, when everybody was trying to solve his dream, and could not, then the cupbearer remembered Joseph, and he said, "We had this Hebrew lad with us in jail, and he solved our dreams." And of course, Pharaoh had nothing to lose. They hurry him out of jail. So Miketz, the end of 2 years, was exactly after the 2 years that the two ministers were released, and Pharaoh had a dream. And our sources say that it was Rosh Hashanah that he had the dream, but it was also Pharaoh's birthday. So he was anxious, I guess, about the future, his own future, the future of his of Egypt, and he needed somebody to solve the dreams. And we'll get to the dreams, but there's a question even before that of why was it an important thing for the Torah to tell us that after 2 years, that this happens exactly 2 years later. So the Talmud says that it was 2 years because Joseph had to wait 2 more years in jail because he asked the cupbearer to remind Pharaoh to remember him. So there was a double language here of remembering twice. And the Talmud says it was almost like an act of being not faithful, that God will release him, that you have to pray directly to God and not to count on people's mercies or help, because we say, a human being is not capable of real redemption. We are slaves of the slave, and that's the whole idea. So we don't use intermediary. He could have said, you know, remember me. But he went too far and said, remember to remind Pharaoh. So he was putting too much stake into the human aspect of help instead of directly praying to God. And it says that he had to, for each language of please remember me, it's a year, because it takes a year for something to be forgiven. Um, a year is what we wait after somebody passes away, right? The Kaddish, the mourning. So Shana, also the word Shana comes from the word leshanot, to change or to repeat. It's interesting. It's to repeat and to change. But something changes after a year. So God forgave for each language that he asked for help after a year. So he waited 2 years. But, and this is a beautiful, beautiful thing about it, and the connection to Hanukkah as well, is that when the time is there, like in Isaiah, when God says, "In its time, I will hurry it," meaning when things are, it's their time, I will. It'll happen right away, overnight. So it's like birth, when you carry the baby for 9 months, and then but when it's time, water breaks and the baby is out. So we are in this moment of Hanukkah, is the same idea that from the pit, from the darkness, from where is the lowest, and overnight, with God's help, of course, then a small group of people of the Hasmoneans were able to overcome a big Greek army, organized army. So it's the same idea. Now, interestingly enough, this Shabbat is the darkest Shabbat, is the shortest Shabbat, is the shortest day of the year. So we are literally in the bottom of the pit of the moment of the darkest moment, as we say, it's the darkest before dawn. So we're literally in this moment, not just in the reading, Hanukkah, and physically, we are in this moment. So this Shabbat has we will pray for our country and for Israel at the end, and for those who are ill. And this is the moment lekavot, to hope. And the idea is this is why God wanted Joseph to wait another 2 years, because part of redemption is to hope. That's the relationship we have with God. If we don't hope, it's like we're not in relationship with the redemption. We don't believe that God could take us out of Egypt, take us out of the pit, out of darkness, to turn things around. So we need to hope. So this is the Shabbat that we need to do it. And actually, in fact, one of the questions that we are asked when we go up to heaven is, have you hoped? Have you waited for redemption? Actively waiting for redemption, not just uh, said one day it's going to happen, but really every day be ready that the Mashiach can come and it'll be turned around. So that's what happens to Joseph. And of course, we say that again, that principle of what happens to the parents will happen to the children. So that is a foreshadowing case of overnight redemption. And if you think of Jewish history, the story of Purim, the story of even the establishment of the state of Israel, when it's time, God hurries it up. So what happens? So after 2 years, Pharaoh has a dream. And what happens in the dream? It says after 2 years' time, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. So actually, the translation misses an important idea here, because in Hebrew, he was standing over, al, above the Nile. And the idea here is that pharaohs saw themselves as gods. So they were over nature. And what it's telling us, that in the future, when the Israelites are going to come out of Egypt and the slavery story, the whole point was to show Pharaoh that he's the king of the universe, that he's not, that God is the king and God controls nature, and he can overcome and overturn nature. He can turn the Nile into blood. He can bring frogs, all the rest of the plagues. So that's an important thing. So he is above the Nile. He's in a place where he controls everything. And of course, his anxieties come from that, because he controls many people. The Israelites are not the only people that he enslaved later. Um, Egypt is a house of slavery, is a system of subjugating other people. So he's nervous that maybe somebody's going to attack him, somebody's going to start a mutiny, a war, and so forth. And in his dream, it says, when when out of the Nile there came up 7 cows, handsome and sturdy, and they grazed in the reed grass. Okay, so healthy, beautiful. And what happened? But presently, 7 other cows came up from the Nile close behind them, ugly and gaunt, and stood beside the cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, gaunt cows ate up the 7 handsome, sturdy cows, and Pharaoh awoke. So he's when he's going to tell Joseph the dreams later, he's going to add a couple of things, and we'll look at the differences to see how much the level of his anxiety was. So, and then he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. Now, some say that he actually woke up within the dream, he woke up and fell asleep. So he was still asleep at this point. It's just one dream with two parts. So he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. 7 ears of grain, solid and healthy, grew on a single stalk. But close behind them sprouted 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the seven solid and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke. It was a dream. Okay, so only here it says he awoke and it was a dream, right? So that's why people say it was one dream. He was still dreaming within the dream. So he wakes up in the morning, agitated, and he is asking his magicians, his priest, to solve the dream. Now, we talked about it more last week about how dreams, how do we see dreams in Judaism and the Torah? How should we interpret dreams? Not just the interpretation of the dream itself, but the content of the dream, but actually dreaming. How should we look at it? So some say that it's a mini prophecy, that if you have a vivid dream that you can trace, that means that God was trying to tell you something, and that's a kind of it gives you the heads up. That's one way of looking at it. The second is just your subconscious speaking. Whatever you filled your head during the day with, then it'll come out and it'll process at night. And it depends on also what you ate before you went to sleep and what you had to drink and so forth. So I would say that personally that it's probably a combination of both. It's the body and the spirit. Everything that we do in life is a combination of the body and the soul. So it is, of course, a physical manifestation of an emotional, substance. But it also, yes, if you have a dream, it means that you're seeing something. And of course, we can't see the whole future, but we have intuition and we have this notion. So it could be that God is also trying to tell you something. So here, Pharaoh clearly in Egypt, and also the stories in the Bible for Jewish characters, dreams are substantial and very, very important. They're telling. And so nobody is able to solve the dream for Pharaoh. So one of the questions is, how come? He has all the staff that he pays and he sustains, and nobody can interpret it. Imagine looking for the best surgeon in the world or the best psychiatrist. He can't find the best psychiatrist or the best doctor. He can, but somehow they were not satisfying him. And the reason, one of the reasons that they were not able to satisfy him is that in his intuition, he knew something about this dream. And we'll talk about it later when Joseph solves the dream. But he had an intuition about what that dream was. And he knew that it meant something really bad and something bad about him too. But nobody on his staff was willing to say that to him. It's not that they were not able to maybe solve it, but they were not willing to tell him the truth. They were afraid to tell Pharaoh, their boss, the truth. that Egypt is going to be in a bad situation and he's going to be have to take care of it and the rest of it. So it didn't satisfy him. So eventually, when there was no solution, the chief cupbearer, the one who was released from jail 2 years before, then spoke up and said to Pharaoh, I must make mention today of my offenses, meaning that he didn't remember Joseph. He didn't mention him up until then. It's not that he didn't remember him, he just didn't want to remember him. So only when everything push comes to shove, then he's able to he kind of pulls Joseph's name. Now, this is not going to be the only time when Joseph is forgotten. Later on, we fast forward 400 years when the Israelites are now flourishing in Egypt after Joseph brings all his family to Egypt and they become a nation, and the Pharaoh sees how they multiplied and flourished, and he's afraid, and he's trying to now have the final solution for the Israelite. And he said, and before that, it says, a generation came that didn't know Joseph.
Mm.
A generation arose that forgot what Joseph did for Egypt, basically saved Egypt. Not only saved Egypt, some say that even at that period when Joseph accumulated all the food in Egypt and then Egypt sold the food to people, that really was the beginning of the real enslavement, because he started buying the people when they sold their whatever they had to sell, and then they sold their land, and then they sold themselves to slaves. That's what it says at the end of the parasha. So so that was he forgot Joseph, and now he remembers him, right? Or wants to remember him. And he said a Hebrew youth was there with us, a servant of the prefect. I'm sorry. And when we told him our dreams, he interpreted them for us, telling each of the meaning of his dream. And what he interpreted was that it came to pass, I was restored to my post, and the other was impelled. So what happened? Pharaoh is thinking this is a proven success here. So of course, when we hear about an experimental, when nothing helps and there's an experimental cure somewhere or pill that is being developed and it hasn't had maybe all the FDA approvals, but it's experimental and the person has nothing to lose and it's administered. So same thing here. Thereupon, Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was rushed from the dungeon. He had his hair cut and changed his clothes, and he appeared before Pharaoh. So, of course, appearing before the king, you have to be you have to look Egyptian. So uh, he in jail he looked like a Hebrew. He had maybe I don't know shteimel is whatever he was wearing, and but here he had to change. It's similar to Esther coming before Ahasuerus, and she had to prepare herself. So it's the same thing. Now again, if you take it to the um, the more mystical or more spiritual level, it means that he's coming in front of the king. And if you remember in the book of Esther, the name of God is not does not appear. And the question is then how come this book was canonized? So the answer was that it's hidden. The word Hester means hidden. So the name of God was hidden, and what it says is that when it says King Ahasuerus, it was the king, the flesh and blood king. But when it says only the king in the book of Esther, it means God. So if you take this to mean the same, that he appeared in front of the king, then of course when we come to pray to God, when we enter the sanctuary, think of how you dressed for synagogue, how you when we pray for God, how respectful and honorable it needs to be. So he's coming to plead before God, and just like the phrase before there's pride before the fall, right? So there's honor before redemption, or prayer before redemption, hope before redemption. And Joseph has to say a certain thing here when he comes before Pharaoh. Because before, when God left him for 2 more years in the dungeon, he, as we explained, he didn't go directly to God. He went through a person, through a intermediary. So here he would have to have the code word for this redemption to succeed. And after 2 years, or after all the years that he has been in Egypt, he understands it now. So they bring him in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. Now I have heard it said that you can hear a dream and tell its meaning. So Joseph, and this is a pivotal moment, Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, not I. God will see to Pharaoh's welfare. So literally where we are now, in the bottom of the pit, so to speak, in the darkest time of the year, in Hanukkah, in the reading of the Torah, this is the point. This is what the Torah is telling us. We have to say, we leave it to God. We do everything we can, of course, our hishtadlut, our effort, but it's up to God now to redeem us. So Pharaoh says to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile. So far the same. When out of the Nile came up 7 sturdy and well-formed cows and grazed in the reed grass. Okay, same so far. And then it says, presently there followed them 7 other cows, scrawny, ill-formed, and emaciated. Never had I seen their likes for ugliness in all the land of Egypt. Here he is adding this. This was not in his original dream, right? He said, I've never seen this ugly cows. This is the worst. So he's adding to the anxiety now. His dream was his dream. But when he now is telling the dream, he is over dramatizing it as well. So it's just a reflection of his anxiety. And then it says, and the 7 lean and ugly cows ate up the first 7 cows and the sturdy ones. And here he adds something that reflects his real subconscious. And he said, but when they had consumed them, one could not tell that they had consumed them, for they looked just as bad as before. And I awoke. So he's adding that part. In the dream, it doesn't say, and it doesn't, and you couldn't tell that they ate the healthy cows. So what he's afraid, that's the interpretation here, is that he was afraid that he will be erased. So as we know, many leaders, people who have used to been used to the limelight, are always concerned about their legacy. What legacy are they leaving behind? And here he's afraid. He's afraid that his legacy will be forgotten, that somebody's going to come out and is a political rival and wipe him out, and he will not be remembered, and he will be gone. And we know from the Egyptian monuments how important their memorials were to them. To build a pyramid like in Giza, with who knows how many hundreds of thousands of slaves, um, you really care about what legacy you leave behind. Of course, the Sphinx, the obelisk, all these monuments, the Egyptian monuments. So then he says, in my other dream, I saw 7 ears of grain full of healthy growing and single stalk, but right behind them sprouted 7 ears, shriveled, thin, and scorched by the east wind. And the thin ear swallowed the 7 healthy ears. I have told my magician priest, but none has an explanation for me. Okay. So Joseph again says, and Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one of the same. Pharaoh has been told what God is about to do. So again, he puts God in the center. And this is Joseph is considered, is called by the rabbis, the Joseph the righteous. He's a righteous person. The text doesn't say that. The text called Noah righteous person, but the text doesn't call Joseph righteous, but he has this reputation of being the righteous because he was able to resist the temptation from Potiphar's wife and so forth. But he had to go through a journey as well. And the journey that Joseph goes through is from putting himself in the middle to putting God in the middle. And this process is the process that the Torah wants us to go through, every person, to say, Hineni, here I am, whatever God you're asking me to do. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, and your rod and your staff comfort me. Good times and bad times, they all come from God. So when Psalm 23 says, on you conduct my life as calm water, that's what it means, that it would be leveled, because life is up and down. But when you believe that everything comes from God, then you treat bad times as you would treat good times. You take the good and the bad the same way. So Joseph was able to go through this whole process, and that's why he's also a righteous person, because we say 7 times a righteous person falls and rises. So the question is, where is the righteousness? The righteousness is caused because somebody fell 7 times and they realize that they realize something and that they keep falling, or in the fact that they keep rising and believing that even from the depth you can rise, meaning that God is there as well in the depth. So Joseph, in the beginning, he had those dreams, right? Last Shabbat we read about his dreams, how he comes to his brothers and to his father, and he tells them that The sheaves will bow down to him. Their sheaves are going to bow down to his sheaf. The stars and the moon and the sun are going to bow down to his star. So clearly, he was putting himself in the middle, and now he matured. He had to be exiled. Joseph was exiled. He's the first real exile, the person that leaves the land and he dies in exile. Before that, we have Jacob, but Jacob returns to the land. But Joseph was exiled, and the idea of exile is when you have to not take something for granted. When you have something, so it's not necessarily a punishment, but it's a teaching that when the Israelites did not take their lands, did not appreciate their land, they were exiled, and then they missed it for 2,000 years, and hopefully now we appreciate it a little more, or a lot more. So Joseph now says this dream is God's interpretation to you. So what he says here, the 7 healthy cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy ears are 7 years. It is the same dream. So again, it's the same dream, but it's not exactly, because he didn't dream about sheaves again. He it's cows and sheaves. So and when Joseph dreams, he dreams about sheaves and he dreams about stars. So there is the heaven and earth here too, the living and the vegetables. So it's just 2 different worlds. But those 2 different references, Joseph interprets as it says the 7 lean and ugly cows that follow are 7 years. Are also the 7 empty ears scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. So that's the 7 and 7 years. But then he says, why was it repeated? He said, because and it says, and why does Pharaoh say that you couldn't tell that they ate the healthy cows? It says no trace of the abundance will be left in the land because of the famine thereafter, for it will be very severe, that famine. So and God and Pharaoh said that as for Pharaoh's having had the same dream twice, it means that the matter has been determined by God. So think of an exclamation point in a text. That's the twice, and many times there's the language, repetitive language in the Torah, in the Bible. Amor, hayo haya, ose asa. So it's naton titen. So it's a doubling of the language, and it's like an exclamation point. And that exclamation point means 2 things. It says that that God decided that it will happen, but also, and that God will soon carry it out. So it's going to be, again, as we were talking about Joseph being hurled out of the pit, it's the same thing. When it's time, God will bring it right away. So it'll start happening right away, and it says, accordingly, let Pharaoh find someone who is discerning and wise, whom you can set over the land of Egypt. What he's telling him is that you need now a project manager here. You have a project here that you will have to now collect the wheat, store it, figuring out how to trace it, how to record it, price it. I mean, there's of course a whole big project, a national project, and he says you need someone to be able to manage it. And it says, and let Pharaoh take steps to appoint overseers over the land and organize the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. Let all the food of these good years coming to be gathered, the grain, and stored in the cities. And then you could use it, of course, when the famine comes. So then Pharaoh, it's like he spoke to his heart, and the plan pleased Pharaoh and all his courtiers. And Pharaoh said to his courtiers, "Could we find another like him, a man with the divine spirit?" See, this is an amazing, amazing phrase here, because Pharaoh is also acknowledging something. And this is exactly the key where our rabbis tell us why did his magician and courtiers were not able to solve his dream? Because nobody dared telling him there's someone above you, that this is coming from the God who is above you. But Joseph was able to tell him that, and Pharaoh internalizes it. And he said, there's got to be something above here, because if this man that just came out of the pit solved my dream like this in a way that nobody else could, it must have come from something higher. So, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is none so discerning and wise as you. And he gives him, you shall be in charge of my court, and by your command shall my people be directed. Only with respect to the throne shall I be superior to you. So this is the second time that now Joseph is in this position, that when he was in Potiphar's house, he was in charge of the whole house, and he tells his wife, Potiphar's wife, when she's trying to seduce him, he said, I can't do this to my master. I'm in charge of everything besides the bread that he eats. Remember the interpretation, which is a reference to her, that he cannot be with her. That's the only thing that he can do. So he is in charge. So Pharaoh further said to Joseph, see, I put you in charge of all the land of Egypt. And he removed the signet ring from his hand, and Pharaoh put it on Joseph's hand, and he had him dressed in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. So he is appointing him to his cabinet. He's like the vice president here. And he had him ride in the chariot of his second in command, and they cried before him, Abrech, and we'll explain what that word Abrech means. Thus he placed him over all the land of Egypt. So Avrech is an interesting word, and Avrech is actually the word that is used today for a yeshiva student, but a high yeshiva student. If you make your studies your life, so in the conversation that is going on in Israel, who's supposed to be conscripted and who's not, the idea is that only those who dedicate their lives to sit and study should be exempt from the army service, but those who are not should, of course, should be conscripted. So Avrech is that word. But when you break also this word, um, the Talmud tells us is it is the word is avrach, a soft father, which means that Joseph has been promoted in some ways, and he's now a soft father. And the Talmud has this discussion about his status. He's an in between, and we know that later on Joseph receives a double portion, just as the firstborn would have received, as a double portion in the inheritance. How does he get the double portion? Through the two tribes. There's no tribe of Joseph, but there's the two tribes of
Right.
Menashe and Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Ephraim and Manasseh are both his both children, and Jacob, before he dies, he tells Joseph, "Your children are like my children," meaning he elevates them to the level of his children, the tribes. So that's how we get. Actually, we have 13 tribes and not 12 tribes. There are 12 sons of Jacob, but there are 13 tribes. So Avrach means that he is elevated above the tribes. He's not Jacob. He's not one of our three patriarchs, the Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, but he's in between. So he's a soft father. And then in the same discussion, it's telling us about, very interestingly, how in nature there are things that are in between. Like, for example, monkeys are somewhere between human and animals, that they are more developed animals than all the others, but they're not human. They're somewhere in the middle. And he gives other examples in nature of an in between things. So Joseph receives this now, this status. So of course, from the Jewish perspective, he's elevated, but also from the Egyptian perspective. And then it says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, yet without you no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. So, of course, he lives in a society where, um, you know, I mean, I guess there are societies like this still, maybe North Korea, that the supreme leader is absolute supreme. And then Pharaoh then gave Joseph the name Tzofnat Pa'aneach. It's a beautiful name. What Tzofnat Pa'aneach? Tzofen
And
is a hidden code. Tzofen is a hidden code, and Pa'aneach lefa'aneach is to decipher. So he gives him this name, the decipher of hidden codes. So it's a beautiful name. And then he gave him for a wife Osnat, the daughter of Potipharah. So who is Osnat? According to the Midrash, Osnat was the daughter of Dinah, the daughter of Dinah, that after she was raped by the Shechem ben Hamor, this was the daughter that came out, and they sent her to Egypt. And Potipharah adopts her and raises her as his daughter, and clearly she is Joseph's niece. So he marries his niece, basically. Some say she is the daughter of um, uh, another daughter of Jacob that we don't really hear about. Oh no, sorry, the daughter of the son of one of the sons of Jacob, meaning that it's his cousin, not his niece. But either way, according to those midrashim, she is a Hebrew as well. So uh, they matched them together, and thus Joseph emerged in charge of the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Leaving Pharaoh's presence, Joseph traveled through all the land of Egypt, and then he starts arranging the land as well. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced in abundance, and he gathered all the grain in 7 years, and the land of Egypt was enjoying, and stored the grain in cities, and he put each city the grain of the fields around it. So it's all the fields around the city, and they gathered it into one big center with big silos. So Joseph collected produce in every large quantity, like the sands of the sea, until he ceased it to measure it, for it could not be measured. And just before we finish this part, it says before the years of famine came, Joseph became the father of two sons, whom Osnat, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget completely my hardship of my paternal home. And then the second he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fertile in the land of my affliction. And then the 7 years of abundance that the land of Egypt enjoyed came to an end, and the 7 years of famine set in, just as Joseph has foretold. There was famine in all the land, but throughout the land of Egypt there was bread. Okay, so we'll stop here.